Hello, everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. We talk all things NBA and NFL. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and hit the subscribe button down below because it really helps out our channel a lot. Also, let us know who is your pick to win the NFC North. Today, we'll be doing another divisional breakdown of 2021 with the NFC North. How's it going, Roman?
I'm good, Chris. Unfortunately, Drew cannot be with us again, but he left his predictions and his fantasy player that he loves. So I'm excited to get into this division. It's our hometown division with our hometown team, the Lions. And we'll be talking about them last just because
They
maybe not much
suck.
to talk about there, but I'm excited to talk about the division with you.
Yeah, me as well, Roman. I think this is a division. We'll talk about them right away here. The Green Bay Packers. You have to start with them in this division. Uh, Key additions. Aaron Rodgers is back, and that's really all that matters. This team. This division we waited a little while to do because we weren't sure if Rodgers was gonna return or not. We kind of wanted to see if the news came out. Now that the news is out, yeah, we're good to talk about this division now, and it really changes the entire dynamic of what teams are going to compete. Because the Vikings and the Bears were probably obvious. I think they were definitely the front runners in this division about a week or two ago, and now it's obviously the Packers, in my opinion. Key additions, not a whole lot to talk about. Randall Cobb, that just made a trade for him. Rookie cornerback Eric Stokes, who I do like a lot, has a lot of speed. Not going to get cooked like some of their corners did in the playoffs last year. So a big addition there, but also a huge loss with Corey Linsley at center. And I think that one hasn't been talked about a whole lot for this team, but that's going to be a big loss that they're going to have to overcome. They also lost Jamal Williams and Christian Kirksey. And like I said, it's not a bunch of subtractions, a bunch of additions, but I think the Stokes addition's a pretty big one for the defense, and I think the Linsley subtraction is a pretty big loss for the offensive line as well. So, I mean, this team, it really lives and dies with the Aaron Rodgers Devontae Adams connection because they don't really have a true number two receiver. But they don't really need one either. They just need a couple of guys to, catch a couple passes a game. Randall Cobb's going to help with that. MVS is going to help with that. They drafted Amari Rodgers, another receiver that I really, really like. I think he's got a lot of talent. He kind of reminds me of a Debo Samuel clone a little bit. I think he's got, plays with a lot of intensity. Not as good as Debo coming out of college. That's why I didn't go as early. But I think he definitely has some of those nice traits. I think he's really tough. I think he's a guy that Rodgers is going to like this year for sure. So I think that was a really good draft pick. Just the problem is it was about 4 years too late to draft a decent wide receiver. So it's better late than never. But at the same time, I don't think this is going to keep Rodgers in town for more than this year. They've already reworked his deal to where he's easily tradable next season. So I expect this to be, one last dance for Adams and Rodgers here this year. But I expect it to be a good one, man. This is a team that won 13 games last year, lost in the conference championship to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Really got off to kind of a slow start in that game, but they were able to. It was a good game for sure. They were not far off from being in the Super Bowl and potentially winning that Super Bowl as well. So, this is a team that's right there again, going to be competing. One of the best teams in the NFC for sure. I guess I'll just start right with my prediction for this team because I don't have a lot to talk about. They didn't really lose or add that much, but I got them I'll say 12-5 for this year. I think they're going to be a solid team for sure. I think they're going to definitely win this division. But at the same time, they did lose a little bit with Linsley. I think maybe the running game with Aaron Jones takes a tiny bit of a hit with the loss of him and Jamal Williams as well. But we'll have to see how that works out. I'll let you break down this team a little bit. What do you want to talk about with this team?
Yeah, well, first of all, like you mentioned, it starts with Aaron Rodgers. If he wasn't there, I don't think I would be picking them as my division winner. I think it would be close, but I do think you could see the Bears, the Vikings, make a leap above them, considering they have proven, not well for the Vikings proven, and then for the Bears you have Justin Fields, but you have better quarterbacks than what we do. What the big question mark is for Jordan Love. Maybe he's good, maybe he isn't, but we'll find out sooner than later if they void off of Rodgers after this year. And even Devontae Adams, who could leave after this year as well. So this is true, like you mentioned, the last dance for them. I will mention though that they did bring back Rodgers, but it didn't come without drama, right? So I think there's going to be some tensity in the locker room. I'd say I don't think it's going to go right back to what it was before. I think Dan Orlovsky said it best, a few weeks ago, where it is a championship roster, but it's not a championship team because maybe the chemistry isn't there necessarily as much. But they did bring back Randall Cobb, which for Rodgers that's big because he wanted him back. I guess it's a key step for the front office to helping Rodgers or actually listening to him for once. And then Eric Stokes, I like the pick in hindsight. In on the day of, I think it was just kind of funny they didn't take a wide receiver because there were plenty available. But Stokes definitely fills need for him. Um, like you mentioned, Corey Lindsey is a huge loss. So their offensive line will kind of be a makeshift line. They didn't bring back Rick Wagner, who isn't best by any stretch of the imagination, but he was, he filled some gaps on the offensive line. So
Serviceable, yeah.
yeah, so they do have some, I guess, not big issues, but they do have to monitor that a little bit more. And the defense kind of took a step back than what was 2 years ago, but hopefully it can get back to what it used to be. Because it was very underrated, not as good as what we think the Bears defense could be, but it was definitely underrated, I'd say. So, like I mentioned, this team I have them at 12-5 as well, winning the division. They're a top three team in the NFC,
Yeah,
guaranteed.
I agree.
So, like you mentioned, there isn't much to talk about besides the Rodgers coming back, but I do think this is still going to be a good team, a dramatic team to watch throughout the season.
Yeah, and I kind of do. I like what you said kind of in the beginning of your statement as well. Just kind of with the Dan Orlovsky thing, I kind of agree with him, which I don't do very much because I think he's a really bad analyst. But I think that this team, while they are a championship contender, there's something missing with this team. And it's why this team has not been able to get to the Super Bowl the last few seasons. There's just something there that it's like, I don't know if it's a hidden thing or something. I don't know what it is. Maybe it is this tension with Aaron Rodgers that's been, underneath and no one's really talked about until this season or whatever, or kind of like at the end of last season. But I think there's just really something there that they can't get over the hump. And I think there's something there that's the reason that's not happening. So I guess that'll come to fruition. The defense, the Smith duo or whatever at the linebacker position, they're a pretty good duo. Obviously, Jair Alexander. They have some talented guys on this defense. And like I said, I think the Stokes edition, this guy's an absolute burner of a corner. They need one because Kevin King was not good enough last year. He got torched in the playoffs and was definitely part of the reason that they were not able to win in the NFC Championship as well. So you're going to need this guy to cover some of these. The receivers in the league just continue to get faster. You need burners out there at corner to keep up with them. And now they got two. Alexander's pretty fast, and then they also got Stokes, who I think is going to make a day one impact for this team. But other than that, I don't really have a lot to add besides Drew has them a little bit higher than us at 13-4. Also, obviously, winning the division with that record, which is, it's like we said, it's a good team that has a lot of returning pieces, but at the same time, I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl. But we'll jump into our next team. It's the Chicago Bears, the other playoff team from that division. As embarrassing as that is to say, 8-8 loss in the wild card in the Nickelodeon Bowl against the New Orleans Saints. A lot of changes, as you can see below. A lot of changes here for this team. They got two new quarterbacks. Andy Dalton, who is the incumbent veteran, and then Justin Fields with their first round pick. They actually traded up to get him. I really loved that move for them. I think it's one of the best moves I could say that the Bears have ever made, to be honest. I think they didn't have to give up. They gave up another first rounder, but I really don't think they gave up a whole lot because, the Giants took Kadarius Toney in the first round. So, compare that and another first rounder for Justin Fields, and you have a pretty one-sided trade in my opinion. But they also add, Marquise Goodwin, Damian Williams, Christian Jones, Jesse James, and Desmond Trufant. I see a couple Lions guys at the end there. Very interesting. But key subtractions, and that first one is huge. Kyle Fuller, they weren't able to re-sign him. He goes to Denver, and he is a underrated corner in this league, in my opinion. So that's going to be a big loss. Definitely their biggest loss of the offseason. Charles Leno, Cordero Patterson, Mitch Trubisky, which is a devastating loss, him going to Buffalo. They really need him. That stinks. And then Barkevius Mingo, the last loss, going to Atlanta. But, this Bears team is definitely different. That's for sure. They have, in my opinion, two upgrades at quarterback. Andy Dalton with the beard and the visor, massive upgrade. This guy is a clear top 5 quarterback in the NFL. No, but Dalton was all right last year when he played for the Cowboys. I think he can be okay in this scheme until Justin Fields eventually takes over at some point in the season. And you know me, Roman, and if you've listened to any of these episodes,
I have,
anybody in the
yeah.
audience, yeah, I love Justin Fields. I mean, this guy I think is going to be an absolute superstar. I think he has the entire package. I mean, this guy is a very mobile quarterback, can move around when the play breaks down. I think he has a lot of intelligence on the field between the years. I think he's a guy that, it doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. I also think he has an absolute cannon of an arm as well, and I think he has solid accuracy while needing a little bit of improvement. I might add his accuracy could definitely use a little bit of improvement out of college. I think he has what it takes to be a good quarterback, and I think he's going to be a really good one of the best in this class, and maybe one of the best in the league. We'll see, but I think this pick, like I said, was an excellent pick. I think they made the right call here, and as a Lions fan, I know we're happy with Penei Sewell. You're going to hear a lot of what could have been with the Bears getting Justin Fields. We're going to have to play him twice every year moving forward, and I am very much not looking forward to it. But the Bears this season, I think, are very interesting. I think they're a team that is definitely a borderline playoff contender. I think the quarterback position has taken a massive upgrade on this team. And while they lost Kyle Fuller, defense is still going to be very good. They have a good defense. They have Khalil Mack, obviously. They have a lot of other really strong pieces on that defense. So the offense should be improved. I mean, we'll see. I mean, Andy Dalton is probably the best quarterback that Allen Robinson has ever played with. He's definitely an upgrade for Darnell Mooney. I think this helps the running game a little bit with David Montgomery and co. I think the Bears could be pretty good this season, honestly. I think, I'll make my record prediction kind of early in this one as well. I'll go 9-8. I think they're just outside of the playoffs, but absolutely can make the playoffs. I think they're right on that borderline wild card team. If they can pick up an extra win or two more than I think they'll get, they'll definitely be in the playoffs. But even at 9-8, they're going to be right there. What do you think about the Bears? I know you're not really a big Bears fan, obviously, because the Lions. But what do you think about this team's chances to be good this year?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't want to get ahead of us hating the Lions because that'll definitely come a little later. But I knew that you were definitely going to say that picking Sewell at least over Fields would have been a big mistake in your eyes, at least. I like the pick, but we'll talk about it later. But I'm so surprised that Fields fell to where he did. When I saw in me recovering the draft on our Twitter, when the Bears traded up to get him, I could tell it was going to happen. I was sick to my stomach just because we do have to play him twice a year. Maybe not twice this year, depending on when they made that transition between Dalton and Fields out. That's definitely the key thing for me. So I do think they have a good roster. Hopefully the defense gets back to what it used to be. Definitely took a down year last year. But if everything goes right, they can be another playoff contender. But I think they still have to, manage Fields. I think they have to make sure he's good to start. Because from all reports, I think Dalton might be the starter day one. So who knows when that transition will come? I think it'll probably be earlier than later. But if Fields does take the reins of this team early on, they can definitely be better. If Dalton has the team for most of the year, I don't really expect too much. You mentioned Allen Robinson coming back on the franchise tag. He didn't re-sign an extension, so it looks like this could be his last year in Chicago. But you did trade away Anthony Miller, so hopefully Darnell Mooney can step up into that wide receiver 2 role. You hope Cole Kmet steps up into the tight end 1 role in that very, very crowded tight end room. They literally have like 8 or 9 or something like that.
Always
But
do.
I think their offense, I think their defense will be stronger than their offense. That's not really saying much, but I think on the offensive side, you got to remember there was a time where there were rumors that either Montgomery or Cohen were going to be traded. I don't know if you remember those, Chris, but in the Wentz talks, they could have had Wentz maybe for Montgomery if that was true or not. But
Yeah.
definitely interesting to note. They did bring Damian Williams, who sat out last year, Marquise Woodwin, who will have a role. I mean, he'll probably fill in what Anthony Miller left. So I think it's all a matter about Justin Fields when he starts. If he sits longer than that, um, the key subtractions, Fuller, obviously a big one. Leno, I think the offensive line did take a step back, but they did get a huge steal in the second round with Kevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State. So
Yeah,
that's
they
another great
definitely did.
pick. I was a fan of that pick as well. So I think it's too early to tell. I think it just matters of who's at the quarterback position, if the defense is good again. A bunch of ifs, I think, but definitely possible of their potential. But I'm gonna give my record. I have them at 7-10, third in the division. But I think obviously the sky is the limit if Fields is the quarterback. But we'll see what happens.
See, And I definitely get what you're saying with the 7-10 record. Andy Dalton doesn't exactly, ensue a lot of confidence into the quarterback position, but they were an 8-8 team and they made the playoffs with considerably worse quarterback play last year with Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, two absolute losers of quarterbacks. So I think in my opinion, I think you know what? I think they're going to be a 10-7 team. I changed my mind. I think they're going to be because I think Andy Dalton will be all right, and then eventually he'll get replaced by Fields, and Fields will get them to 10-7. Which I mean, they still might not make the playoffs with, but I do think they're going to be a decent team because I just don't really see how they could get worse from their 8. They didn't really, I mean, besides Fuller, they didn't really lose a lot, and they upgraded at the most important position in football majorly, even with Andy Dalton, who I don't think is like crazy good quarterback. I think they got to be at least a 10-win football team this year. And we'll see if that comes to fruition. Drew doesn't agree either. He's got them at 8-9, and then you obviously have them at 7-10. But I guess I'll be the guy that kind of defends the Bears because I'm kind of the Bears apologist to the three of us normally. They're probably my favorite team outside of the Lions in this division, even though I don't really like them. But I do love Justin Fields again. So that definitely, I think when he comes in, they're going to win a lot of games. So 10-7 is my final record with this team. Other than that, not really a lot to talk about again with this team, but definitely a lot more interesting to talk about than the Packers there. But we'll jump into our next team and a team that I see in a very similar tier to the Chicago Bears, and that's the Minnesota Vikings. Last year, 7-9. Clearly missed the playoffs with that record, as you see there. But they made some pretty nice additions in the offseason, in my opinion. Spent a lot of money on the defense. Made a nice draft pick as well. Christian Darrisaw is where I'll start. I think that was a really good pick. That'll definitely help out their, in my opinion, their best player in Dalvin Cook and the running game for sure. I think that's a big deal. Dalvin Tomlinson up the middle at defensive tackle, Sheldon Richardson as well. So a total overhaul up the middle. Patrick Peterson at corner, and then Xavier Woods at safety, which they paid. I know they paid him a decent amount of money, and they really didn't lose a whole lot. I mean, Anthony Harris, who's a decent safety, but they replaced him with Xavier Woods. Riley Reef, who I mean is just kind of a guy. He's not nothing special. And then Kyle Rudolph, but they don't really need him either because they got Irv Smith starting to mold into that starting tight end role. But I mean, the Vikings are a team that I do like as well. I think 7-9 is they're going to make some. I don't. This is another team where I don't see a way they don't get better this year. I think with the additions on the defense was really the problem last year. Kirk Cousins actually was really solid last season. This 7-9 record is not on him. He was really solid last season, and this offense actually was good. I mean, Dalvin Cook ran free pretty much all year. Was one of the best running backs in the league, both in real life and in fantasy. Was just an absolute monster all season, and was very durable too, I might say. But also, they have two outstanding wide receivers in Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Both guys returning this year. Both are going to be huge for this offense. And I think, like I said, this offense is going to be good again this year. They didn't lose anything this year. So, and they added Darrisaw. He's going to be an upgrade from Riley Reef. All right. And day one, honestly, I think there's a lot of tackles in this class that are going to make an impact day one. And Darrisaw is one of them. So, there's another one we will talk about as well, like you said, in about 5-10 minutes. But I really think this defense is where what needs to improve, and I think it's what's going to improve. I mean, Pat Pete, yeah, he's not the same corner as he used to be, but he definitely helps the back room, in my opinion. I think he's with a veteran leadership. He's still a solid corner, in my opinion. I don't think he's trash. I don't think he's done, so I think he'll help. The two D tackles up the middle are definitely going to help as well. Sheldon Richardson's an impact player. I think he'll be good, and then Xavier Woods is also a solid safety that I'm sure they'll get to like as well. So I think this defense is going to take some strides. If they can just be average, I think, and I'll jump into my prediction again, 10-7 as well. But I think this team is as more like would win the wild card over the Bears at 10-7 as well. So I think both teams will be at 10-7, but I think the Vikings will be the team to make the playoffs in this division. I think this is a very solid team. Like I said, the 7-9 record really doesn't show their improvements this year and what this team can be going into the season.
I completely agree. I think many people are overlooking this team. I think they're very underrated, and even if they just get back to the average defensive play that they used to, their defense is no slouch. I think last year was just a one-off year, and you could kind of tell like halfway through the year they're kind of trading pieces away. That they're paying too much in Ngakwe, for example. They had him and then traded them pretty quickly. So I think the defense can get to what it used to be. Another subtraction that we didn't mention was Jeff Gladney, a quarter that they drafted a year ago, who they had just cut. They recently cut actually because of a criminal charge.
Oh yeah, I forgot
So
about
kind
that.
of see how that took a turn for the worse in that situation. But they did bring back Patrick Peter. They did bring in Patrick Peterson, so hopefully he has something left in the tank. And then I think probably next year or the year in the upcoming draft, they'll probably find another replacement for that. I think this defense is going to be good. I don't. We can't really explain why the defense was as bad as it was last year, but the offense was making up for it. I think Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen both can be really great options this year for in real life and fantasy. Justin Jefferson was hampering an injury recently, but hopefully he'll be good enough to go for this season. I expect him to be, but Dalvin Cook health is the main issue for him. And behind the offensive line, I think their offensive line is really good. It seems like every year they're always pumping out a draft pick, a signing that bolsters the offensive line even more. So they're going to be really good, I think. And then the defense, like you mentioned, at least being an average defense. That's all we're going to ask for. Then you might be able to be good. I think I mentioned they're underrated. I don't have them winning the division, obviously. I don't think they can contend for the division, even if all things are pumping for them. I'm going to give them a 9-8 record, second in the division. Kirk Cousins, I think he can continue what he had last year. They didn't bring in Kellen Mond, though, so maybe they're a little bit impatient with him, maybe looking for results right away. But we'll see what happens in that regard. But this is a very interesting team to watch as they bounce back from a very bad, not bad record, but subpar record the year before.
Yeah, and like I said, I think, and we all kind of agree, they are going to make a little bit of a bounce back here, and I think it's really on that defensive side of the ball. I agree. If they can be somewhat average on defense, this will be probably a borderline to making the playoffs team right here. And I also agree, though, I don't see a world where they take the division unless like Rodgers gets traded or hurt still. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
two, they're going to be fighting with Chicago, and I think one of those teams will probably make the playoffs, and the other one will unfortunately miss out. But I think both teams, to me, are similar. They both made some improvements. Vikings on the defense side of the ball, and the Bears more on the offense side of the ball at the quarterback position. So, like I said, I see both these teams very similarly, and I think it'll come down to the races with these two teams. But I know a team that it will not come down to the races to, a team that, I mean, you might be excited to talk about, but I'm really not. It's the Detroit Lions. I mean, this team. I mean, there's just so many additions and subtractions to talk about. This team got considerably worse in the offseason, in my opinion, and I really think this could be the worst team in football this year. I mean, let's talk about at the top. I mean, Dan Campbell taking over. Obviously, I don't even need to see him coach a single game to know he's a massive upgrade from Matt Patricia. Let's start there. I mean, Campbell seems like a much better fit for this team. Brings a ton of energy. Apparently, drinks 1,000 milligrams of caffeine before every practice, or like when he gets up during the day. And I don't know how he does that, but I see why he has so much energy all the time, and why he says random crap on interviews. So that a lot of that all adds up, because if you're drinking that much caffeine, you're going to be really jittery, and you're going to say some stuff that you can't. Your brain's moving too fast, man. But anyways, jump into the key additions and start at the top with the new franchise quarterback, Jared Goff. You already know my opinions on him. I think he sucks, but we'll talk about it more after I go through the additions and subtractions. They also added from the Rams Michael Brockers as well in a trade. They drafted Penei Sewell, generational talent, offensive lineman, a guy that's going to be a stud for this team. They also added some insanely good weapons with Jamal Williams, Rashad Perriman, and Tyrell Williams, and then they just signed Nickel Roby-Coleman, which was actually a decent signing, I will say. But key subtractions, obviously at the top, you look at the first three, massive subtractions. Matthew Stafford, Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones Jr., probably their three best skill position players, all gone. That's tough, man. But they also lost Prater, Jared Davis. Oh no, darn, he sucks. But and then Justin Coleman as well, who was burnt toast last year. So I don't really consider those last two major losses. But let's talk about the Lions. I mean, Jared Goff is a absolutely unreal downgrade from Matthew Stafford. I mean, Stafford, you're going from a top 10 quarterback to a bottom 10 starting quarterback, in my opinion. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. I mean, Goff was really good a few years ago, but the last 2 years he's been horrible. I mean, let's flat out say it. He's barely had over a one touchdown to interception ratio, and that's just not going to get done in the NFL. And I don't think he has what it takes to get it done in this offense. It's not even all on him this year. It's going to be because he's throwing to freaking Brashad Perriman and Tyrell Williams. What do you expect him to do, man? I mean, yeah, if he had Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones, maybe I'd have a little bit more excitement for him in this year. Maybe I'd be like, oh yeah, maybe he can turn his career around. But I think this is a guy that's going to start for 1.5 seasons, and then he's going to get replaced by whatever rookie they take next year with the 101 or 102. But they did draft Penei Sewell, and like you said, you think I'm going to trash the pick. I'm not going to trash the pick, and I'm not going to say oh, like he sucks or anything. Sewell's gonna be a great player, man. I mean, this is one of the best players in the draft class, one of the best offensive lineman prospects in the last 10 years. Even I think this guy's a I mean, I think his floor is making Pro Bowls. I think his ceiling is one of the best, or the best offensive lineman in the league. I think this guy's going to be a superstar. I just am wondering what with my love for Fields, it's gonna be tough watching Justin Fields light up our defense for the next 10 years while we have Sewell blocking for us, which I mean helps, but he's not. I mean, we're not winning a Super Bowl just because we have Penei Sewell. We're winning a Super Bowl because we have a good quarterback. It's kind of my debate, and I really love this quarterback class. Whereas next year, I mean, yeah, Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell are good, but I don't like those guys as much as I like Justin Fields or a Trey Lance, or I mean, obviously we're going to get him with Trevor Lawrence. I don't like those two as much as I like these three in this class. It's kind of my debate, and I feel like we could have found a similarly really good offensive lineman last year when we have a high draft pick, regardless of having Justin Fields. But I do see the argument for getting Sewell now and not paying Justin Fields a year earlier when we're not really ready to compete. So I do kind of see both sides. I just really wish the Bears didn't get Justin Fields because that's going to suck. But back on the team as is, I mean, their strengths are offensive line, kind of that battery unit is a strength because they also have, TJ Hawkinson, who's a good blocker and a good receiving tight end. So that kind of offensive line extended is really good. And you can extend that out to their starting running back, DeAndre Swift, as well, who I very much am in love with. I love DeAndre Swift. I think he's a really talented player. But he is dealing with a groin injury right now, so we'll have to see how that shapes out for the season. But their weaknesses are, quarterback, obviously. Jared Goff, one of the weaker starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Wide receiver is miserable. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the rookie fourth rounder, might be their best receiver, and that's not saying much, man, because they got Perriman and Williams, and neither guy is probably in my top 80 receivers. So not great there. And then defensively, I mean, you can look at the defensive line. It's not great, probably bottom 10, but it's probably their strongest unit overall. Linebacker, also not great. Gonna be one of the worst again this year at the linebacker position. And then obviously their secondary was absolutely putrid last season as well. One of the worst secondaries in the league. I'll give you my roster prediction. I'll let you talk about this team for an extended period of time because I know you're obviously a huge Lions fan, but I probably 3-14 is what I'm saying for the record. I think this is clearly the one of, if not the worst team. I think them and the Texans are going to be fighting for the first overall pick. And obviously, if Watson returns for any amount of time with the Texans, they're not going to get the first overall pick. So that's my opinion. 3-14. Honestly, I could see them doing worse. I just have no faith in this team. I think they're going to get boat raced most weeks.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to unpack with this team, and we could probably go on for a while since we know this team very well, but I'll kind of just keep it to a bare minimum. First of all, it was Sewell. I mean, it's a great player, obviously. That can't be denied. The pick, though, that might be a little bit more questionable in terms of the future scope, as you mentioned. It'll always be like a what if thing of what if we had Fields. And like you said, I think we'd like to pick a lot more if the Bears did end up with Fields.
Oh, definitely.
If Fields went anywhere else, even if we still pass on him, then we'd be fine, I think. But yeah, Goff is the quarterback for I guess relative future. Definitely this year, maybe next year we'll see. I know this is where I'd love for Drew to be on because I know that him and I are much higher on, not much higher, but higher on Goff than you are for sure. And I won't really go much too in depth with it because we've already hammered him enough. But obviously, it'll be a downgrade from Stafford. Um, Obviously, he's going to have a downgrade at skill positions such as wide receiver. Tight end, though, I think Hawkinson will probably be the best tight end he's ever played with. Offensive line, it'll be the best offensive line he's had behind in front of him. So maybe that helps him, maybe it doesn't, but at least he'll have time. He'll have time back there, and at least with Perriman and Williams, the one key trait that the Lions had in mind when signing them is speed. They're both burners, whether they show it or not. That's what their main key is. So they're both nicked up veterans, so hopefully they can get healthy and be healthy for Goff because those two are going to be heavily relied on. Uh, you might look at this team and say, oh, there are no weapons, but Goff will literally have to make weapons out of Williams and Perriman. They will have to do something. We can get them just to do nothing. So I think those two will produce, and whatever you want to define as produce. I mean, it's not going to be a high scoring offense. They're not going to get a lot of points. So the target share is very minimal. So Hawkinson, well, I do think he's the best receiver on this team. For fantasy purposes, it's very, I think, indifferent, very kind of controversial. So I think you can definitely look at Hawkinson as maybe the key factor out of this offense. And I'd like to think that Goff could be good. Obviously, it's not going to go right this year. Based off my record, I have him at 4-13. But if somehow he does play well, especially with the offense this has, maybe the Lions will consider bringing him back for another year instead of trading him off. I personally like to think, and I'll firmly believe in this. I do not think we'll have the second overall pick. I don't think you can chalk us up for the second overall pick next year. I think we can surprise a lot of people, starting with Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. I think they've done so much good for this team. I think it's definitely possible where you can see them win 4 or 5 games this year. Um, I think, the key subtractions, Galladay, Marvin Jones, huge losses. The defense, that's going to be, you got to remember, last year, the defense was literally the worst defense in probably our franchise history. So you got to remember that it's going to improve by default. I do think they have some nice pieces back there. Okuda is going to be healthy. The secondary hopefully takes a step up. The coaching for the defensive side of the ball is, I'm very much a fan of it. Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, Aubrey Pleasant, the cornerbacks coach, all that good stuff. So it's going to improve by default. And whether it similar to the Vikings, even if it plays close to average as possible, maybe they won't get blown out as much. There were literally so many games last year to get up 40 plus points. I don't expect that to happen. But there's obviously there's not much to like, but I do think there's a lot to be optimistic about. Starting with offensive line, starting with the weapons of Amon-Ra, Cephas, Hawkinson, Swift, all that. So we'll see what it amounts to. Like I mentioned, I have them 4-13, last in the division. But I do think we have to not give them credit because they haven't done anything yet, obviously. But I do think we have to halt the brakes on them being the worst team in the NFL. I truly don't think that'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, we can agree to disagree on that. I mean, we don't really disagree too much by record wise, but I guess I'm just not really leaving any room for upside for this team because I think they go into the season knowing that they have no chance of making any amount of noise in the league, in my opinion. So sorry, man. I know, and you have them at 4-13. Drew's got them at 4-13. Clearly, the seller of the division, but they're just a team that I just don't have a lot of faith in this year. They lost too much. I know, Jan Campbell. I don't know if he's an upgrade as a coach. I just know I know he's an upgrade. I just don't know how much he's going to do for this team at year one with this roster being the way it is, which is just an absolute mess. So hopefully next year, when we talk about the Lions going into the season, we're talking about a fresh new quarterback, some new pieces on both sides because they probably are going to have plenty of cap space. So I mean, this team could definitely make some improvements pretty quickly and get back into contention. But
I will I will say one thing before we hop off or switch off. I will say though that upside. I agree with you. They're not going to have any upside in terms of double digits, wins, playoffs, or anything. That's out of the question. When I think of upside for this team in 2021, I'm thinking like 6 wins, probably max. And I think maybe Drew would agree with that as well. So the upside very minimal, but I think many people are going into the season thinking they're going to win 1 or 2 games, and I just don't think that's the case. And I think yeah, like I mentioned, I think this is a team that there's not be no expectations, well, unless you think of bad expectations. But like I mentioned, I think 4-13 would be not a win for them, but I think it would be. I think it would surprise people if they even got to 4 wins too.
yeah, definitely would. Would surprise me for sure. But we'll talk about what our standings. I'll go first. I've got the Packers at first in the division at 12-5. Vikings second, 10-7. Bears also at 10-7, and then the Lions down at 3-14. He has the Packers at 13-4. He's the highest on them. He's got the Vikings at 10-7, the Bears at 8-9, and then the Lions at 4-13. And then Roman, what's yours?
Yeah, I have the Packers at 12-5, Vikings at 9-8, Bears at 7-10, and the Lions at 4-13.
Yep, all pretty similar on this division. Not too much different besides maybe my opinion on the Bears a little bit higher than you guys. But we'll jump into the fantasy thing right now, and then we'll get out of here. But first, T.J. Hawkinson is Drew's pick. We'll start with that. Hawkinson, I like Hawkinson this year, but at the same time, I really, really, really want to get one of those elite three tight ends. If you miss out on them, I'm fine with Hawkinson. I think he's in PPR, he's very good. I think he's going to catch a lot of passes this year, but I don't think he has a lot of upside. I don't think this is going to be the year where he jumps into, that top three. I think a lot of people are expecting him to be really, really good this year. I think he's going to be a nice, safe tight end, kind of like he was last year. I mean, the quarterback change is evident. I don't think they're going to score a lot of points either, so he's probably not going to find the end zone too much, but he's going to be a favorite target of Jared Goff, and I think that's where the appeal is. And he's a first round talent. He's a guy that can do a little bit of everything on the field. He's going to be out there pretty much for every snap. But I think he'll be good. I think he'll be very solid, but I think it's more like that safe tight end one every week, going to be finishing, between like 5 and 10 almost every week, which is solid. You need guys like that. Not everybody can get those top three tight ends. So I do like Hawkinson. I'm not in love with him where he's going in the draft, in that fifth round area. I think that's where he went in our league. So it's kind of like I think he's fine for what you're paying up for him, though.
Yeah, I agree. I love Hawkinson as the player. I think I've started to temper my expectations in terms of him breaking out as what you would expect, maybe a top three. Because obviously, as we get closer to the season, once you realize that there's not really a whole lot of upside after the top three, or a lot of a high floor in terms of the top three. So definitely get one of the top three tight ends if you can. Hawkinson, though, as I mentioned earlier, will command a lot of targets, so in PPR he should be much more favorable. But I think most weeks his points will purely come off of receptions and maybe not
Yeah.
yards. I think we'll see if the team can move the ball quickly on the field. I don't expect them to score that many points, so that could hold them back a little bit. The Lions have their first preseason game as we're recording tomorrow, and they're supposed to play their starters for a quarter, so we'll see what the offense looks like in that regard. But Hawkinson, definitely love him. He'll probably be consensus, maybe tight end 4 off the board, but will he finish there? I think it could be more unlikely than not. But I do like the pick. I want to root for him really badly, and
Right.
he will be a huge piece of the offense. It's just a matter of whether Goff and the offensive scheme, the game script, can actually support that.
Yeah, and I'll jump into or I'll talk about it a little more, and then I'll let you jump into your fantasy take with Hawkinson. I think he does. I think he has a very high floor. You're kind of saying there's not a lot of high floor guys. I think you're saying that as a point to TJ Hawkinson, who has a high floor for sure. I mean, 6 for 50 is a stat line we are going to see a lot from him this year. 5 for 50, 6 for 50, 7 for 60 in a touchdown. I think that's going to be a lot of the stat lines we're going to see for Hawkinson. I don't think I would take him as the tight end for. I would rather have Kyle Pitts for the upside. I'd rather have Mark Andrews for the upside. But I think Hawkinson in a PPR is a safe pick in the fifth round. If he can fall to that sixth round, that's where I would start to really like him. If he falls into the sixth, that's where I would be very confident in taking him there. But Roman, take it away for your fantasy pick for this division.
Yeah, just keep on talking about the tight ends a little bit, because there are going to be teams who won't come up with the top three, top four tight end, and then you're kind of struggling to find someone that you can get on your team. I'm going to talk about Irv Smith, tight end for the Vikings. I think he's a great late option if you don't end up with the top three. So hammer your team with depth, the middle rounds, secure your bench, but at the end, I think you can definitely take a guy like Irv Smith to even start on your team. I think that's how good he can be. He might start off slow, considering that there's still Justin Jefferson and Thielen, but I think many people are expecting him to break out, and I think it's definitely possible with the departure of Kyle Rudolph. Irv Smith stepping into his own. I think it'll be an offense that will score points. I think the market share is there for him. So if you don't end up having a guy like a Waller or Kittle or Kelsey, you can definitely wait later on a guy like Irv Smith and still be satisfied with his production.
Yeah, I mean, Irv Smith is a guy that you can definitely take a shot on. I'm not confident that he's going to break out this year, but I think he definitely has an opportunity to. He's a talented tight end with an opportunity with Rudolph out of the way now. He's shown some flashes of being a solid red zone tight end. I think that's where he's going to make his living. He needs to get like 6 to 8 touchdowns, and that in that case, I think he could be a tight end one potentially. But I don't think he's gonna rack up a ton of yards. He'll probably be around the 400 or 500 yards. And then if he can get to that 7 touchdown mark, yeah, he could definitely be solid. I have absolutely no problem with that. And you're getting him so late to where he's got some upside for sure. I know I said 500 yards. He could get some more than that for sure. That's definitely in the realm of possibility, especially if Justin Jefferson. I don't think he's going to miss any time, but he's coming into the season banged up. He definitely could go down with, he could re-injure it or something. So you definitely have to look out for that. He's got some upside built in with that as well. So Irv, definitely a guy that if you can get him, target him pretty late after having a stacked roster, I definitely like that. I'm going to shy away from the tight end position for a minute, and I'm going to talk about a running back that I like, and that's Dave Montgomery. I think all four running backs in this division are going pretty early. You got Aaron Jones, a borderline first round pick, Dalvin Cook, the second overall pick, and then DeAndre Swift, the top, like a third round ish pick as well. A solid, all three are solid options. But I think David Montgomery is definitely going under the radar. I mean, this is a guy that's being drafted more in that late third, early fourth round. And I think that's a little bit too low. I mean, Monty last year was the RB4, and a lot of it I know was down the stretch with a little bit of an easier schedule. He leveled up big time for fantasy. I mean, this is a guy that showed a lot of promise. His rookie year broke a ton of tackles, but really didn't put it together for fantasy. And then last year, he was really consistent for the first half of the year, scoring, between like 10 to 15 points almost every single game in a PPR. And then down the stretch, he just absolutely annihilated teams. And like I said, the matchups weren't super tough, but he's got some of these same matchups again this year. I don't think the Packers' run defense was horrible last year. They didn't do a lot to improve it. The Lions' run defense was putrid last year. They didn't do a lot to improve it. And the Vikings' defense got a little bit better, but I'm not really worried about any of these men. I mean, that's 6 of their games right there are against these three teams, and none of them have a even an average run defense. I think they're all in the bottom 12 run defenses in the league. So I think Monty's going to eat this year. He showed some pass catching chops last year as well, caught a ton of passes, and that was part of the reason he also leveled up. And while Tariq Cohen's back, he's still banged up and for all accounts doesn't look like the same player. I'm not worried about Tariq Cohen at all. Honestly, I'm more worried about Damian Williams than Tariq Cohen, and I'm not worried about Damian Williams either. I think he's going to come in and spell David Montgomery for a little while. And Damian Williams would be an excellent guy to, add at some point throughout the season, kind of right before a matchup. And if Montgomery gets hurt, Damian Williams is going to step right into that role. So that's what I think Damian Williams is. I think he's more of that handcuff that you probably don't even need to draft. You can just leave on the waiver wire and just make sure you're looking out for to spend up on him in free agency or something when you get an opportunity. But I really like Montgomery because I think this offense is going to take a little bit of a step up. I think Andy Dalton is good for him. I think Justin Fields is good for him. And the offensive line, while it sucked in the first half of last year, I thought they definitely showed some improvements down the stretch against these softer matchups. They definitely were part of the reason that Monty was able to level up. But like I said, I like him this year. I think he can definitely be an RB1 despite being drafted later and people thinking, he's a gross player, which I understand he's not the most fun. He's on the Bears. He's not the most, like all three running backs in the division. You'd much rather root for him than Monty. But at the same time, I think Monty shows a supreme value being a young guy that people just for some reason are just don't really like or don't really trust. But he was awesome last year. I'm not saying he's going to be the RB4 this year again because a lot of running backs got hurt. He probably was realistically like the RB8 if everyone was healthy. But he was still awesome last year, man. And I definitely respect what he did, and I'll be looking to draft him this year.
Yeah, I think he's another safe option. I definitely know that after like the first, sweep of running backs, he'll be left for the bunch. And especially with the guys he's going around, like Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, I think I might be pretty comfortable taking Monty over both of those guys. So I think, he's definitely going to fall in drafts just because of his lack of, or his, I guess, not the hype around him as many other running backs are. But I think you can be comfortable taking him as your RB2. I think you would probably be in agreement with that, where most people take them as their flex player even. I think you can definitely start him right away as a running back too on the team, and then hopefully he has another good season. But like you mentioned though, with all those injuries last year, you probably won't see him in the top of the ranks this year. But I think, like I mentioned, he has that safe floor each week. Not much pressing competition in that backfield unless
Yep.
you're really worried about Williams or Cohen. Like you mentioned, though, you're not. I don't think I am either. So I think he's definitely a safe option that you can definitely take a shot on. And once the huge wave of running backs goes, but hopefully though, by the time that he comes on the board, you have already a good stacked running back already, either
Yeah.
one or two, because him as your running back one on the team, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with
No,
that.
no, absolutely not.
You better be getting some good wide receiver and tight ends if he's your running back one. So um, just take that into account. Like I mentioned, should be a good starter on your team.
No, I think where he fits in perfectly is a nice drafted RB2. Maybe you get that early round tight end, you get that stud running back. You come in the late third, early fourth, and you grab David Montgomery. I think that's a perfect pick at that second turn. And yeah, like I said, I mean he's kind of gross. It feels gross to draft him, but I just don't see how he's gonna be. He's got guaranteed volume. He can catch the ball. He's gonna score some touchdowns. And I just don't really get what the difference between him and like a guy like I like him more than like a guy like J.K. Dobbins. I like him more than Miles Gaskin, which he's going earlier than him. I like him more than Miles Sanders. I like him more than Josh Jacobs. That entire tier of running back, I think he is definitely above. I think he fits more within, DeAndre Swift, who's going earlier. Even like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think he kind of belongs in that tier, I would say. But unless you have anything else to add, that's the end of the episode for us. We're the Zone Defense Podcast. We have plenty more off-season content as we really get closer to the NFL season. Probably some more fantasy football stuff. Maybe another mock draft at some point. And we're going to continue the team previews. We're now done with the NFC, so we'll be jumping into the AFC next time. And I'm very excited for a couple of divisions in the AFC for sure. So that'll be a lot of fun. Me and Drew at some point, like I said last week, will be doing his own defense basketball hour, just kind of recapping the offseason. We'll have to do that soon for sure because a lot of the moves have now come to fruition. But just remember to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Pod. Search us up on Apple Podcasts, and then smash that like button. Give us some more comments. We always love to get those comments. Tell us, what you think about Rodgers coming back. Do you think this Bears team's going to take a leap? Do you think the Lions are going to go 0-17? Tell us whatever you want to say in the comments. But thank you for listening to the episode, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
See ya.